The September night air over New York was unseasonably cold, the sky a heavy blanket of clouds that barely let the stars glimmer above Manhattan's vast horizon. Central Park, usually teeming with life by day, transformed after dark into a labyrinth of shadows and whispers. Madison Mitchell and Olivia Cooper, both 19 and best friends since childhood, had decided on a late-night stroll through the park, a ritual they often used to decompress from the pressures of their university studies. On that fateful night, September 17, 2001, the city was still reeling from the attacks of 9/11. A collective air of vulnerability hung over the people of New York. "Are you sure you want to go tonight?" Olivia had asked, pulling her red jacket tighter. "We could just stay in and watch movies at my place." Madison shook her head, her blonde hair swaying gently. "I need some fresh air, Liv. Besides, we've never had any trouble on our walks. It'll do us good." The entrance to the park on Fifth Avenue was unusually deserted. A security guard gave them a nod as they passed, reminding them that the park closed at midnight. It was 9:30 p.m. when their silhouettes vanished among the trees. Sarah Mitchell, Madison's mother, glanced at the clock for the third time. 11:45 p.m. Her daughter was always home by 11. She tried Madison's cell phone again, but it went straight to voicemail. A knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach, she called Jessica Cooper, Olivia's mother. "Jess, is Olivia back yet?" The silence on the other end of the line was answer enough. "I'm calling the police," Sarah decided, her voice thick with dread. At 2:13 a.m., police officers Johnson and Ramirez swept their flashlight beams across the paths of Central Park. They had already found the girls' backpacks abandoned near the lake, their phones and wallets still inside. "Got something over here!" Ramirez shouted, his light illuminating scuff marks in the dirt. It looked as if someone had been dragged. As the officers called for backup, a young woman emerged from the trees. She wore a paramedic's uniform and seemed agitated. "Are you looking for two girls, a blonde and a redhead?" she asked, her voice trembling. The officers tensed. "How do you know that? Who are you?" "My name is Emma Taylor. I'm a paramedic at Presbyterian Hospital. I was finishing my shift and decided to take a shortcut through the park." She paused as if reliving something terrible. "I saw them. They were walking just ahead of me when a black van pulled up. Two men in ski masks jumped out and dragged them inside. It all happened so fast. I tried to run after them, but they disappeared towards Central Park West." At dawn, Sarah Mitchell and Jessica Cooper received the devastating news at the precinct. Detective Harris, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, explained that all signs pointed to a kidnapping, likely connected to human trafficking. The witness, Miss Taylor, saw the van and got a partial plate number. "We're following that lead, but you need to prepare yourselves. These cases are complicated." Jessica Cooper frowned. Why was a paramedic walking alone in the park at that hour? Wouldn't it be safer to take a cab after her shift? The detective nodded. "We've questioned her extensively. Her story matches the evidence we have so far. She works the night shift, and according to her colleagues, she often takes that route to the subway station." Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Intensive searches yielded nothing. The van was found abandoned in New Jersey, wiped clean of any useful evidence. The families offered rewards, held vigils, and appeared on national television. But Madison and Olivia had vanished like ghosts. Sarah poured her grief into the Foundation for Missing Persons, channeling her pain into helping others. Jessica, however, could not let go of the details of the case. Something about Emma Taylor's testimony felt wrong. Why didn't she call for help immediately? She would ask Sarah during one of their meetings. "If I witnessed a kidnapping, I'd call 911 on the spot. I wouldn't wait to stumble upon the police hours later." Sarah sighed, exhausted. Jessica, we've been over this 100 times. The police checked her alibi. They've even tracked international trafficking rings. We can't cling to conspiracy theories. On Christmas of 2004, more than 3 years after the disappearance, Sarah visited Jessica's apartment. She found the walls covered in newspaper clippings, photographs, and maps marked with pins. "I've been investigating Emma Taylor," Jessica confessed, her eyes red from sleepless nights. She switched hospitals 6 months after the incident. A year later, she married a doctor named Robert Taylor. They have a house on the Upper East Side they couldn't possibly afford on their salaries. Sarah took her friend's hands. "Jess, you're hurting yourself. The police looked into her. They found nothing suspicious." "What if they didn't look hard enough?" Jessica insisted. "What if we were all wrong?" But fate was about to deliver an unexpected twist. On January 12, 2005, a historic storm slammed into New York. Torrential rains caused unprecedented flooding across Manhattan. Central Park became a chaotic scene of fallen trees and washed-out paths. As workers assessed the damage, the receding waters revealed something disturbing. An obscured entrance, exposed by erosion, led to an old, forgotten underground tunnel. What they would find inside would change the course of the investigation forever, and uncover a truth far darker than anyone could have imagined. The storm had left New York in a state of emergency. Flooded streets, power outages, and fallen trees kept emergency services working relentlessly. In Central Park, maintenance crews were assessing the damage when Marcus Rivera, a young Parks Department worker, noticed something unusual near Bethesda Fountain. "Boss, come look at this!" he shouted, pointing to an opening in the ground, partially hidden by uprooted shrubs. The entrance to what looked like an old drainage system had been exposed by a landslide. His supervisor approached cautiously. "Probably part of the park's original system. There are tunnels all over the city that aren't even on modern maps." They decided to inspect the entrance to assess for structural damage. Marcus was the first to descend, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The tunnel was narrow, the air thick and damp. They moved forward about 20 meters before reaching a fork. "This place is huge," the supervisor muttered. "We should report this before we go any further." But Marcus had already ventured down the right-hand passage. His voice echoed back chillingly. "Oh my God! Call the police, now!" What Marcus had discovered was a makeshift room partially flooded. Murky water reached his ankles, but what was floating in it froze his blood. A necklace with a butterfly charm, a frayed friendship bracelet, and what appeared to be remnants of clothing. Within hours, the tunnel was cordoned off and swarming with forensic officers. Detective Harris, now grayer and with more lines on his face than he'd had 4 years ago, watched as technicians meticulously cataloged every item. "This necklace," an officer murmured, holding up an evidence bag. "It matches the description of the one Madison Mitchell was wearing the night she disappeared." A shiver went down Harris's spine. After 4 years with no real leads, they finally had something tangible. He ordered an expanded search and a complete draining of the area. As the water was pumped out, more objects surfaced. A single athletic shoe, a soaked notebook with the initials OC, and most disturbingly, rusted surgical instruments scattered in a corner. A scalpel, forceps, and a stethoscope with engraved initials. E.T. Sarah Mitchell was making dinner when the phone rang. Detective Harris's voice sounded different, carrying an urgency that made her sit down slowly. "Mrs. Mitchell, I need you to come to the precinct. We found evidence related to Madison's case." Her world seemed to stop. "Have you found her? Is she—" "I'd rather discuss the details in person. Can you contact Mrs. Cooper as well?" An hour later, Sarah and Jessica sat across from the detective. On the table lay photographs of the recovered items. "The butterfly necklace," Sarah whispered, recognizing it instantly. I gave that to her for her 16th birthday. Jessica pointed to another photo. That notebook. Olivia always carried one to write her poems. The detective took a deep breath before continuing. We found these items in an underground tunnel in Central Park, exposed by the recent flooding. We're running DNA analysis, but preliminary evidence suggests the girls never left the park that night. Jessica turned pale. What are you saying? The forensic team found small blood samples at the scene, and these medical instruments. He slid another photograph toward them. This stethoscope in particular has the initials E.T. engraved on it. Emma Taylor, Jessica said immediately, a mixture of horror and validation in her voice. I always knew something was wrong with her story. The detective nodded grimly. We're looking for her for questioning. According to our intel, she resigned from her job at Presbyterian this morning, citing a family emergency. Sarah, stunned, stared at the photos, unable to fully comprehend. But she said she saw them being taken in a van. Why would she lie? To misdirect the investigation, Jessica answered, her voice trembling with rage. While we were searching for international traffickers, she was just living her life, working in hospitals, getting married. The following days were a whirlwind of police activity. Forensic analysis confirmed the blood found in the tunnel belonged to Madison and Olivia. The search intensified with specialized teams excavating deeper into the tunnels. In a hidden compartment behind a wall of old bricks, they found what they had feared most, human remains. The medical examiner confirmed they belonged to two young women with clear signs of surgical intervention. They hadn't been victims of human trafficking. They had been murdered right there, likely soon after they disappeared. An arrest warrant was issued for Emma Taylor and her husband, Dr. Robert Taylor. But when police arrived at their elegant Upper East Side home, they found the doors open and signs of a hasty departure. They're gone, an officer reported. Looks like they left just a few hours ago. Meanwhile, in Jessica's apartment, she and Sarah obsessively reviewed all the information they had gathered on Emma and Robert Taylor. Robert was a plastic surgeon, Jessica explained, pointing to a medical journal article. He specialized in complex facial reconstructions. And look at this. She showed Sarah a photo from a charity gala in Miami, dated 6 months prior. In the picture, Robert Taylor smiled alongside two young women in lavish jewelry and elegant gowns. Models from this agency. Jessica enlarged the image on her computer. Look at their faces, Sarah. Look closely. Sarah peered at the screen and the floor seemed to fall away beneath her. Though the makeup was heavy and the hairstyles different, the fundamental features were unmistakable. They look like them, she whispered, a wave of nausea washing over her. Like Madison and Olivia. Jessica nodded, tears of rage sliding down her cheeks. This agency popped up 2 years ago. These girls, they call themselves the Divine Twins, never give in-person interviews. They only appear at specific events, always in elaborate makeup, always close to the Taylors. Sarah couldn't look away from the photograph. Are you suggesting that's them? That they're alive? No, Jessica replied, her voice breaking. I'm suggesting something much worse. I think Emma and Robert kidnapped our daughters to experiment on them, and then used their faces as a blueprint for other women. Detective Harris received Jessica's call at midnight. By dawn, he had contacted authorities in Florida and obtained more photographs of the Divine Twins. A facial recognition specialist confirmed the unthinkable. There was an 89% match between the model's facial features and the photographs of Madison and Olivia. We need to find these models, Harris ordered, and we need to stop the Taylors before they disappear for good. The race against time had begun while somewhere, Emma and Robert Taylor were preparing their escape, carrying with them New York's most macabre secret. The news of the gruesome discovery in the Central Park tunnels leaked to the press, unleashing a media firestorm that shook New York to its core. The faces of Emma and Robert Taylor were plastered across every news channel, alongside blurry images of the divine twins. The theory of a simple kidnapping and trafficking ring had been replaced by something far more disturbing: illegal surgical experimentation. Detective Harris established an operations center at the 19th Precinct. Maps, photographs, and timelines covered the walls. A special team was tracking every known movement the Taylors had made over the past 4 years. "We have confirmation," an officer announced, rushing in with a report. "The Taylors boarded a flight to Buenos Aires yesterday morning, hours before we found the stethoscope." Harris slammed his fist on the table in frustration. How could they have known? "Maybe they have a contact in the parks department," another detective suggested. "Or maybe they just saw the news about the storm and guessed the tunnels could be exposed." "What do we know about these models?" Harris asked, pointing to the photos of the divine twins. "They appeared on the Miami fashion circuit about 2 years ago," the officer replied. "They only show up at select events, always in heavy makeup. No one has ever seen them without it. According to their agency, they're extremely private and have special conditions." Sarah and Jessica were summoned to the precinct again. The impact of the discoveries had left them in different states of shock. Sarah seemed adrift, as if her mind refused to process the horrifying truth. Jessica, however, was filled with a fierce determination. "I want to go to Miami," she declared to the detective. "If those women have our daughters' faces, I need to see them with my own eyes." "It's too dangerous," Harris countered. "The Taylors could have accomplices. Besides those models, if they truly are victims of forced surgery, they're going to need professional psychological support." "It's been 4 years," Jessica insisted, her voice trembling. 4 years of searching for answers. You can't ask me to stand on the sidelines now." Finally, the detective agreed to a compromise. Jessica and Sarah could travel to Miami under police protection while he coordinated with local authorities to locate the divine twins. Meanwhile, the forensic analysis of the surgical instruments found in the tunnel was yielding chilling details. Emma Taylor's fingerprints were on several of them, and microscopic traces of blood matched Madison and Olivia's DNA. "It was butchery," the chief medical examiner murmured to Detective Harris during a private meeting. "Based on the marks on the bone fragments, they performed multiple procedures. They likely harvested facial tissue, cartilage, everything they needed to recreate their features on other people." Harris, who had spent decades in homicide, felt a wave of nausea. Why would anyone do something like this? For money? Or some profound psychological disturbance? The medical examiner answered the unspoken question. "There's a black market for everything, detective, even for stolen identities." In Miami, the situation grew more complicated. The modeling agency representing the divine twins reported they had canceled all their scheduled appearances and were not answering their calls. Their South Beach apartment was empty. There were no signs of violence, but there was evidence of a hasty departure. Sarah and Jessica arrived in a sweltering, humid Miami. They were met by Detective Ramirez, their liaison with the NYPD. "We have surveillance on the airport and the ports," she informed them as she drove them to their hotel. "If they try to leave the country, we'll spot them." That night, Jessica couldn't sleep. From her hotel room window, she watched the city lights, obsessively swiping through photos of the divine twins on her tablet. Her phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number. "Boardwalk, bench 17, 5 a.m. Come alone if you want answers." Jessica hesitated. It could be a trap, but it could also be her only chance. Without waking Sarah or alerting the police, she slipped out of the hotel. Dawn was just beginning to stain the sky when she reached the meeting point. The boardwalk was deserted except for a few early morning joggers. On bench 17, a hooded figure was waiting, looking out at the ocean. "Who are you?" Jessica asked, keeping a safe distance. The figure turned slowly. It was a young woman with large, dark sunglasses and a scarf covering the lower half of her face. "My name is Sophia. I know the girls you're looking for." "The Divine Twins?" Jessica asked, her heart pounding. "That's their stage name," Sophia replied. "Their real names are Vanessa and Claire. They were patients of Dr. Taylor." Jessica held her breath. "What do you know about my daughter, about Olivia?" Sophia looked down. "I don't know everything. I worked as a nurse with them on special procedures. At first, I thought they were legitimate reconstructive surgeries for accident victims. Then I started to suspect." "Where are they now? Where are Vanessa and Claire?" "The Taylors took them when they fled. They're their masterpiece, their insurance policy. If you find them, you'll find the Taylors." "Why are you risking this, talking to me?" Jessica asked. "I saw your daughter's picture. I know what they did in that tunnel," Sophia answered, her voice breaking. "And I'm afraid I'll be the next one to disappear." Sophia handed her a small USB drive. "There are files from Dr. Taylor on here. Locations, contacts, including a ranch in Argentina where they might be hiding. Destroy this after you use it." Before Jessica could ask any more questions, Sophia walked away quickly, vanishing among the first tourists arriving at the beach. Back at the hotel, Jessica found Sarah awake and worried, with Detective Ramirez by her side. "Where were you?" Sarah asked, both relieved and annoyed. Jessica held up the USB drive. "I have something. I know where they might be." The files on the drive were horrifying. Before and after photographs of various surgical procedures, including those performed on Vanessa and Claire. There was also a detailed journal where Robert Taylor documented his techniques, referring to Madison and Olivia simply as specimens M and O. The last entry, dated 3 days earlier, mentioned a transfer to the southern property, with coordinates that corresponded to an isolated ranch in the province of Córdoba, Argentina. Detective Harris quickly organized a joint operation with the Argentine police. In less than 24 hours, an elite team was discreetly surrounding the property, a luxurious and isolated estate protected by high walls and security systems. "We have visual confirmation," the team leader reported to Harris via video call. "The Taylors are here, along with 2 young women matching the description of the Divine Twins." The raid was swift and precise. Robert Taylor tried to resist and was wounded. Emma was arrested without incident. The 2 young women, Vanessa and Claire, were found in separate rooms, apparently sedated. When the mugshots reached New York, Sarah and Jessica could finally look at the faces of those who had shattered their lives. Emma Taylor, her hair now dyed and her features subtly altered by plastic surgery, stared into the camera with a vacant expression. "When can we see those girls?" Sarah asked Detective Harris. "I need to know. I need to understand." "They're under medical and psychological care," Harris replied. "According to preliminary reports, they've been psychologically manipulated for years. They believe they are sisters and are apparently unaware of the origin of their faces." Jessica shook her head in disbelief. "They don't know their faces were taken from our daughters?" "It's possible the Taylors used mind control techniques in addition to keeping them sedated and isolated," Harris explained. "Experts say it could take months, even years, for them to recover their true identities, if they ever do." As the Taylors' extradition was being processed, investigators uncovered an international network of wealthy clients who paid fortunes for these exclusive transformations. The Taylors weren't just murderers. They were the architects of a gruesome enterprise that turned human identity into a luxury commodity. For Sarah and Jessica, the capture of their daughter's killers brought only a bitter form of justice. As the full truth emerged from the depths of that forgotten tunnel, Both mothers now faced a new, disturbing dilemma. What to do with the young women who wore the photos of Madison and Olivia. The extradition of Emma and Robert Taylor to the United States became an unprecedented media spectacle. Dozens of reporters were waiting at JFK Airport when the DEA plane carrying the accused landed. Emma, with her lost gaze and impassive face, seemed absent. Robert, however, maintained an unsettling smile as officers escorted him, his arm still in a sling from the wound he received during his capture. "We didn't do anything they didn't want," Robert declared to the reporters before the agents silenced him. His words sent a chill down the spine of everyone present. Meanwhile, in a specialized hospital in Buenos Aires, Vanessa and Claire, whose real names remained a mystery, began a long process of medical and psychological evaluation. The Argentine doctors were shocked by what they discovered. "The surgeries are the work of a technical master, but a moral monster," explained Dr. Mendoza, a forensic plastic surgeon, during a video conference with U.S. authorities. "The facial reconstructions are so precise that without the 3D scans we've performed, it would be impossible to detect that these are not their original faces." MRI scans revealed further horrors: small subcutaneous devices near the base of both women's skulls, apparently used for the controlled administration of sedatives and other chemicals. "Constant control," Dr. Mendoza murmured. "When they weren't working as models, they were likely in a semi-conscious state, functional enough to feed themselves and perform basic tasks, but incapable of questioning their reality." The lead psychiatrist, Dr. Alonso, added, "Their minds have been systematically reprogrammed. They firmly believe they are orphans rescued by the Taylors years ago. They have no memories prior to their rescue. It's an extreme case of psychological manipulation." In New York, as the Taylors awaited trial, Sarah and Jessica were briefed on the young women's condition. Dr. Chen, appointed as their medical liaison, explained the situation in her office. "Vanessa and Claire, not their real names, of course, are physically stable but psychologically fragile," she said, showing them recent photographs. "The good news is the devices have been successfully removed. The bad news is the psychological damage could be permanent." Sarah stared at the photographs with a mixture of horror and fascination. It was like seeing Madison, but it wasn't her. The features were identical, but there was something different in the eyes, in the way she held her head. "What will happen to them?" she asked in a barely audible voice. "The Argentine authorities have agreed to transfer them into our custody once they are stable enough to travel. They will be treated at a specialized facility for cases of severe trauma and psychological manipulation." Jessica, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "I want to see them. I need to see them." Dr. Chen exchanged a look with Detective Harris, who had insisted on being present. "I understand your need, but I must warn you. Seeing them could be profoundly traumatic for you. And for them, meeting the mothers of the young women whose faces they now wear could completely destabilize them." "They are victims too," Harris added gently. "They were likely selected for physical characteristics similar to Madison and Olivia's to facilitate the surgeries." The investigation was advancing on multiple fronts. The FBI had identified 5 more cases of missing young women whose facial features appeared to have been transferred to wealthy clients. In the Taylors' Upper East Side apartment, hidden behind a false wall, they found a complete laboratory and detailed photos of their projects. The district attorney announced he would seek the maximum penalty: life in prison without the possibility of parole. The charges included first-degree murder, kidnapping, illegal human experimentation, and a dozen other serious felonies. 3 weeks later, Vanessa and Claire arrived in New York under tight security. They were taken directly to the Blackwood Institute for Trauma and Recovery, a discreet facility on the outskirts of the city. Dr. William Blackwood, the Institute's founder and a pioneer in treating victims of cults and brainwashing, took on the case personally. "It is, without a doubt, the most complex challenge of my career," he confessed to Harris during a private meeting. "These young women haven't just lost their original identities. They've had new ones imposed upon them, literally built upon the remains of victims. They are trapped in a terrifying existential limbo." Sarah and Jessica maintained a daily routine of calling the Institute, anxious for any sign of progress. A month after the women were admitted, Dr. Blackwood finally agreed to a controlled meeting. "They've shown some stability," he explained, "and they're beginning to question the narrative implanted by the Taylors. I believe a brief encounter, under carefully controlled conditions, might be beneficial." On the day of the meeting, Sarah and Jessica waited in a specially prepared room. Large windows let in natural light. The walls were painted in soft tones and the furniture was comfortable but strategically arranged to avoid any sense of confinement. "Remember," Dr. Blackwood reminded them, "do not mention your daughters' names, do not make direct references to the surgery, let them guide the conversation. If they show any signs of distress, we will end it immediately." When Vanessa and Claire entered, time seemed to stop. Despite being prepared, the visual impact was devastating. There they were, walking, breathing, moving with the faces they had so longed to see again. Claire, who wore Olivia's face, was the first to speak. Her accent had a faint foreign lilt that the real Olivia never had. "You are the mothers, yes? The ones who have been calling?" Jessica nodded, unable to form words. "They told us. They are telling us many things," Claire continued, her voice shaky, "about who we really are, or who we are not." Vanessa remained slightly behind, watching with Madison's eyes filled with confusion and fear. "The doctors say that our faces," Vanessa touched her cheek gently, "that they are not our own." Sarah took a deep breath. "They are beautiful faces," she said finally, "and they are yours now." Something in those words seemed to break a barrier. Claire stepped forward, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I had a dream of a park, a big park, at night. I was walking with someone, laughing, and then darkness," she confessed. "Dr. Blackwood says it might be a memory," Jessica finished, involuntarily breaking the rule, "but not mine. He says it could be Olivia's." Dr. Blackwood tensed, but to his surprise, Claire didn't react negatively. Instead, she repeated the name softly. "Olivia, it sounds familiar somehow." The meeting lasted barely 20 minutes, but it had opened a door no one had expected. In the following weeks, both Vanessa and Claire began to experience fragments of memories that did not belong to them. Dr. Blackwood theorized it could be a poorly documented phenomenon. Residual cellular memory in the transplanted tissue. "It's scientifically controversial," he admitted, "but there are documented cases of transplant recipients who experience tastes, preferences, or even memory fragments from the donor." Meanwhile, the trial against the Taylors moved forward. Emma had accepted a plea deal, providing full details of their crimes in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. Robert, however, maintained his defiant stance, insisting his work was revolutionary art, and that the victims were merely necessary canvases. During her testimony, Emma revealed the horrific truth about that night in Central Park. There were no masked kidnappers, no black van. She herself had approached Madison and Olivia, introducing herself as a paramedic and offering help when she pretended to find them disoriented. "I told them they seemed to have been drugged," she confessed in a monotone voice, "that they needed to come with me for medical attention. Once we were in the tunnel, I injected them with a powerful sedative. Robert arrived later to help me prepare everything. The final autopsies confirmed that both young women had been alive during the initial surgical procedures, conscious but paralyzed with special drugs. They had felt all the pain as their facial identities were stolen from them. This revelation shattered Sarah and Jessica all over again. They had clung to the hope that their daughters had died quickly. On a cold November morning, the jury found Robert Taylor guilty on all counts. Emma, for her cooperation, received a reduced sentence of 40 years without parole. Robert was condemned to multiple consecutive life sentences. As the Taylors began their sentences, Vanessa and Claire took small but significant steps toward recovery. They had decided to keep the names they now knew, recognizing that their original identities would likely never be fully reclaimed. "We are not Madison and Olivia," Claire explained during a joint session with Sarah and Jessica. "But we aren't just the divine twins either. We are something new, born from tragedy but determined to build lives that honor the ones who lost theirs so that we could have these faces." For Sarah and Jessica, the relationship with these young women had become something complex and profoundly moving. They were not their daughters, yet they carried a physical part of them. They could not replace what was lost, but they offered a strange form of continuity. Winter gave way to spring, and with it, a solemn, intimate ceremony. In Central Park, near Bethesda Fountain, a small monument had been erected in memory of Madison and Olivia, and of all the Taylors' victims. As the four women, 2 mothers and 2 survivors, placed white flowers beside the commemorative plaque, a ray of sun broke through the clouds, illuminating their faces. In that fleeting moment, past and present intertwined in a silent promise to never let the darkness have the final word. 6 months had passed since the Taylors' conviction. Spring had bloomed into summer, and the story that once dominated the headlines was beginning to fade from New York's collective memory. For Sarah and Jessica, however, each day brought new challenges as they tried to rebuild their lives. Sarah's apartment, once filled with photographs of Madison, now held a careful balance. Images of the past coexisted with new memories. A recent photograph, placed prominently on the mantelpiece, showed Sarah beside Vanessa during an afternoon at the botanical garden. "It's like living in a parallel universe," Sarah had confessed to her therapist. "Sometimes I look at her, and for a second, it's as if Madison is there. Then she speaks or moves a certain way, and the mirage shatters." Jessica had taken a different path to process her grief. After decades as a marketing executive, she resigned to devote herself full-time to the Mitchell Cooper Foundation, established to help families of missing persons and victims of violent crime. It was on a July morning that Jessica received the call from Dr. Blackwood. "We have an interesting development," he said, his voice cautious. "Claire has started writing poetry again, and it's remarkable." A chill ran down Jessica's spine. Olivia had been a talented poet since she was 13. What kind of poetry? Verses about a lake, trees, a feeling of freedom followed by darkness. But the most surprising thing is the style. We've compared these new poems with some of Olivia's recovered writings. The cadence, the metaphors, they're astonishingly similar. That afternoon, Jessica met Claire at the Institute. Unlike their first encounters, they now greeted each other with a brief but genuine hug. "Dr. Blackwood tells me you've been writing," Jessica commented as they walked through the Institute's gardens. Claire nodded. "It started as part of therapy, but then the words just began to flow as if someone else were dictating them." She handed Jessica a worn notebook. On the first page, a poem titled "Reflection in the Lake" spoke of duplicate identities and faces fading beneath the water. Jessica immediately recognized elements of Olivia's unique style. The abrupt pauses, the contrasts between light and dark. The way she wove the concrete with the abstract. It's beautiful, she said, her voice trembling. Do you mind if I read it aloud? As Jessica recited the words, Claire closed her eyes as if listening to a familiar melody. When she finished, a single tear traced a path down Claire's cheek. Sometimes I dream of a room full of books, Claire confessed, a window that looks out onto a cherry tree and a feeling of belonging. Jessica's breath caught in her throat, unable to speak. Olivia's room had had that exact view. Meanwhile, Vanessa was experiencing her own episodes of inexplicable connection to Madison. During an art therapy session, she had painted a detailed corner of Central Park that she had never consciously visited. It was the exact spot where Madison used to practice yoga on Sunday mornings. These phenomena, which Dr. Blackwood meticulously documented, baffled the scientific community. Some attributed them to suggestion, others to coincidence. A small group of researchers, however, was beginning to explore more controversial theories about cellular memory and the transfer of information through transplanted tissue. One day, while sifting through emails at the Foundation's office, Jessica received a message from an unknown address. The subject line read simply, "Information about Sophia." Jessica's heart began to race. Sophia, the nurse who had provided the crucial tip that led them to the Taylors, had vanished shortly after their meeting in Miami. The authorities had searched for her to testify, but it was as if she had evaporated into thin air. The email contained only a set of GPS coordinates and a date, tomorrow, 3 p.m. After consulting with Detective Harris, who insisted on sending undercover officers as a security measure, Jessica went to the meeting. It was a discreet coffee shop in Brooklyn. Sophia had changed drastically. Her once long dark hair was now short and dyed blonde. Thin scars, skillfully concealed with makeup, traced her jawline. "I had to have my face altered," she explained in a low voice. "There are people still looking for me. Not everyone involved in the Taylors' network has been captured." The revelation struck Jessica like a physical blow. A network? Are you saying they didn't work alone? The Taylors were the visible tip of the iceberg. Surgeons, nurses, anesthesiologists, and clients. Very powerful clients who would pay any amount to possess someone else's beauty. Sophia discreetly pulled a USB drive from her purse. "This contains names, dates, locations. I've been collecting this information for years as life insurance. Now that the Taylors are in prison, it's safer for it to come to light." That same night, Detective Harris reviewed the files with a special FBI team. The information was explosive. Politicians, celebrities, international business leaders, all connected to a global network of trafficking and extreme body modification. "This goes far beyond the Taylors," Harris murmured, running a hand through his graying hair. "We're going to have to move very carefully. Some of these people have connections in the highest echelons." Sarah was informed of the new discoveries during a visit to the Institute to see Vanessa. The young woman had made remarkable progress in her therapy and was considering options for continuing her education. "More people involved?" Sarah asked, horrified. "How many more girls?" "We don't know for sure," the detective replied. "But based on Sophia's information, there could be dozens of similar cases worldwide." That afternoon, as they shared tea on the Institute's terrace, Sarah noticed something different in Vanessa, a spark of determination she hadn't seen before. "I've been thinking," Vanessa said, gazing at the distant Manhattan skyline. "I want to study law. I want to help people like me, like us." Sarah felt a surge of pride mixed with a pang of déjà vu. Madison had expressed the same desire months before she disappeared. "It's a difficult path," Sarah cautioned. "I know," Vanessa replied, "but I have a unique perspective, don't you think? No one understands better what it means to lose your identity and fight to reclaim some sense of control." Meanwhile, in the maximum security federal prison where Robert Taylor was serving his sentence, an unexpected situation was developing. Taylor had requested an interview with Detective Harris, claiming to have crucial information about the network Sophia had begun to expose. Harris, skeptical but obligated to follow any lead, found himself sitting across from the man whose crimes still gave him nightmares. "Detective," Taylor greeted him with a disturbingly friendly smile. "Thank you for coming. I imagine our old nurse has been busy sharing secrets." Harris remained impassive. "What information do you have, Taylor?" "Not information, Detective, a warning. What Sophia has told you is just the beginning. The real question isn't who our clients are, but who funded the entire operation." Harris leaned forward slightly. "Who are we talking about?" Taylor leaned back in his chair, clearly savoring the moment. "Have you ever heard of the Lazarus Group? Officially a medical research consortium specializing in advanced regenerative techniques. Unofficially, well, let's just say they view the human body as a collection of interchangeable parts." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because, Detective, I've noticed certain patterns in recent weeks. Guards who shouldn't be on my block. New doctors asking unusual questions. I believe Lazarus is cleaning up loose ends, and I am a particularly troublesome loose end." 3 days after that conversation, Robert Taylor was found dead in his cell. The official cause was suicide by hanging, but Harris noticed disturbing details in the crime scene photographs. Tiny injection marks hidden beneath the hair, almost invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. The investigation into the Lazarus Group became a classified operation involving multiple federal agencies. Sarah and Jessica were informed of the basic developments, but many details remained confidential for their own safety. One August afternoon, as Claire and Vanessa strolled through the Institute's gardens with Sarah, Jessica arrived with unsettling news. "They tried to access the Institute's medical records," she explained in a low voice. "Dr. Blackwood intercepted a sophisticated hacking attempt aimed specifically at Claire and Vanessa's files." Dr. Blackwood, who had joined the conversation, nodded grimly. "We've reinforced our security, but I believe it's time to consider more drastic options." "What kind of options?" Sarah asked, instinctively moving closer to Vanessa. "Relocation," the doctor replied. "New identities. A program similar to witness protection, but adapted to their unique circumstances." The proposal landed like a bombshell. After months of building a new normal, the idea of another complete reinvention was overwhelming. "No," Claire said firmly, surprising everyone. "No more running. No more hiding. If these people, this Lazarus Group, want to find us, they will eventually. I'd rather face them on our own terms." Vanessa nodded, taking Claire's hand. "We've spent years being manipulated, used as experiments. We will not go back into the darkness." Detective Harris consulted later on their decision, proposed a compromise, continuous but visible protection, combined with a controlled media strategy. "If Lazarus operates in the shadows," he explained, "let's expose them to the light. Let's make Claire and Vanessa so visible that any move against them becomes impossible to conceal." And so, in September of 2005, Claire and Vanessa gave their first public interview, carefully prepared and with strict limits on what journalists could ask. With Sarah and Jessica by their side, they shared fragments of their experience and announced the creation of a foundation dedicated to victims of medical crimes. The interview generated a wave of public support and shone a spotlight on the dark world of illegal plastic surgery and trafficking. Investigators around the globe began connecting seemingly isolated cases, revealing patterns that pointed to a global operation. For Sarah and Jessica, watching these young women become powerful advocates for other victims brought a bittersweet consolation. They were not Madison and Olivia, but in their actions, in their courage, there were echoes of the daughters they had lost. One autumn afternoon, as golden leaves fell over Central Park, the four women visited the memorial near Bethesda Fountain. A bond had grown between them that transcended conventional categories. They were not family by blood, but they shared a connection forged in pain and resilience. "Sometimes," Vanessa said as she placed flowers by the plaque, "I feel as if they're guiding us somehow, as if they've lent us not only their faces but their strength." The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the last leaves of summer and the promise of a winter that, for the first time in many years, did not seem so dark. The winter of 2005 covered New York in an unusually thick blanket of snow. The streets and avenues, transformed into white channels between buildings, seemed quieter, as if the entire city were holding its breath. For Claire and Vanessa, the change of season marked an important transition. After months of intensive therapy, both had been cleared to live semi-independently. The apartment they shared, located in a secure building in Brooklyn, had been carefully selected by the FBI. Discreet surveillance systems, undercover guards, and strict protocols formed an invisible shield around them. Despite these restrictions for the young women, it represented a huge step toward autonomy. "Sometimes I just stare out the window for hours," Claire confessed to Jessica during one of her weekly visits. "Watching people walk by, living their normal lives. It's both fascinating and terrifying." Jessica understood the feeling perfectly. After losing Olivia, she had experienced that same sense of disconnection, as if watching the world from behind a pane of glass. "Are you still having the dreams?" she asked, preparing tea in the small kitchen. Claire nodded. Olivia's dreams, as they had come to call them, continued. Fragments of memories that didn't belong to her, but which appeared with growing clarity. A prom, laughter shared with Madison, a first kiss under a flowering tree. Blackwood suggests it could be a form of cellular memory, or perhaps just my mind trying to forge connections. "It's unsettling," Claire explained, choosing her words with care. "Sometimes they're so vivid I wake up convinced they're my own memories." Vanessa, meanwhile, had channeled her energy into her studies. Accepted into a special program at Columbia, she took classes online and occasionally attended seminars under strict surveillance. Her determination to become a victims' rights attorney had never wavered. "It's strange," she remarked to Sarah over lunch. "Before all this, from the fragments I can piece together, I was a completely different person. Shallow, obsessed with appearances. And now," Sarah completed the thought with a sad smile, "now you see beyond the surface." Madison had that quality too. She could see what others tried to hide. The investigation into the Lazarus group crept forward. Detective Harris, now assigned to a special interagency task force, followed leads that stretched from Tokyo to Zurich. Each new connection revealed the chilling scope of the operation. This wasn't just about experimental face transplants. It was a sprawling black market of extreme body modification for the ultra-wealthy. One January night, Harris received an encrypted call from an anonymous informant. The digitally distorted voice offered a stunning revelation. "Lazarus isn't just an organization, detective, it's a philosophy. The belief that humanity can transcend its biological limits through selective appropriation. And its true leader is closer than you can possibly imagine." 2 days later, while reviewing the Taylor case files, Harris noticed a previously overlooked detail. In several photographs recovered from the Taylor's apartment, there was an older, elegantly dressed man identified in Robert's handwritten notes simply as the benefactor. Facial analysis identified him as Dr. Victor Weiss, a respected retired surgeon and philanthropist, founder of the Weiss Institute for Regenerative Research. The very same institute that had coincidentally offered Claire and Vanessa generous full scholarships for normalizing reconstructive treatments. "They want to erase our faces," Harris murmured, the pieces finally clicking into place. "Erase the evidence." The next morning, the FBI discreetly raided the Weiss Institute's offices in Manhattan. Dr. Weiss, however, had vanished hours earlier, tipped off by an internal leak. What they found in his private office confirmed their worst suspicions. Detailed files on dozens of transformations, before and after photographs, and most disturbingly, complete dossiers on Claire and Vanessa, including their current location. Harris immediately ordered the evacuation of the Brooklyn apartment. When the agents arrived, they found signs of a forced entry and a struggle. Claire and Vanessa were gone. The news struck Sarah and Jessica like a terrible echo of the past. Once again, they were in a police station, staring at surveillance photos, listening to terms like abduction and ongoing search. "This can't be happening again," Sarah whispered, her gaze lost. "We can't lose them too." Jessica, however, had changed over the years. Where there was once despair, there was now a cold determination. "We know who has them," she said, her voice firm. "And this time, we won't wait 4 years to find them." The rescue operation launched with military precision. All known properties belonging to Weiss and his associates were placed under surveillance. Financial records revealed recent transactions, specialized medical equipment sent to an isolated estate in the Catskill Mountains just a few hours from New York. "That's where he is," confirmed Sophia, who had re-emerged from the shadows to help. "I recognize the pattern: high-end surgical equipment, backup generators, portable life support systems. They're preparing for a major procedure." Time was of the essence. According to Sophia, the standard Lazarus protocol for cleaning up evidence involved multiple rapid succession surgeries designed to eliminate any trace of previous work. As the tactical teams prepared, Harris received an unexpected call from Emma Taylor. From her prison cell, she had been following developments through leaked news reports. "Weiss doesn't want to just eliminate the faces," Emma warned, her voice a strange mix of remorse and technical fascination. "He wants to preserve them. They're his masterpieces, his validation. He'll transplant them again, probably onto recipients who've paid fortunes for them." The next morning, under a gray sky heavy with snow, 3 FBI helicopters descended on the Catskills estate. Agents found 4 doctors and 6 assistants, all preparing an advanced, makeshift operating theater. Claire and Vanessa were sedated but alive, each in a separate room already prepped for surgery. Dr. Weiss was captured trying to escape through an underground tunnel that connected to a hangar where a private jet waited. When the young women woke up in the hospital, Sarah and Jessica were by their sides. The reunion was emotional but brief. Doctors insisted on absolute rest after the physical and psychological trauma. "They had them marked," Harris explained during a debriefing. "Literally marked with surgical lines preparing for the facial extraction. We got there just in time." The capture of Weiss set off a chain reaction. Seized documents revealed connections to government officials, celebrities, and international tycoons. The Lazarus network began to crumble as its members scrambled to distance themselves or negotiate for immunity in exchange for information. 2 weeks after the rescue, during her recovery, Claire experienced something extraordinary. While asleep, she had her most vivid dream yet. She was in Central Park. It was night and she felt a paralyzing fear, but this time the dream continued past the moment of capture. She clearly saw Emma Taylor approaching, offering help, and then the prick of the needle. She saw the tunnel, the lights, and finally, the face of Robert Taylor leaning over her with clinical fascination. When she woke, Claire had a complete memory of Olivia's final moments. "It wasn't just a kidnapping," she explained to Jessica, her voice trembling. "It was a hunt. They studied us for weeks, learned our routines. Emma earned our trust, pretending to be a regular jogger in the park. When she finally acted, she knew exactly how to manipulate us. These transferred memories, though harrowing, provided crucial evidence. Emma Taylor, hoping to further reduce her sentence, had omitted significant details about the crime's premeditation. With Claire's new testimony, prosecutors were able to strengthen the charges against the few remaining Lazarus members trying to evade justice. Spring arrived in New York with a sense of cautious renewal. Claire and Vanessa, fully recovered physically, continued their therapy under Dr. Blackwood's guidance. The trauma of the second kidnapping had been severe, but it had also solidified their resolve. "We don't want to be defined by fear," Vanessa explained during a carefully orchestrated press conference. "Not by what was done to us, nor by what they tried to do to us." At his trial, Weiss painted himself as a misunderstood scientist, a visionary ahead of his time. "We are no different from the pioneers of heart transplantation," he declared during his testimony. "They too were called monsters before they were hailed as innovators. History will judge me more kindly than this court." The jury disagreed. Weiss was sentenced to multiple life terms, and his assets, valued at over $3 billion, were seized to create a compensation fund for his victims. During the summer, as the global investigation into Lazarus continued to unravel connections in dozens of countries, Claire and Vanessa made an important decision. They wanted to know their true identities. Weiss's records, combined with DNA analysis, finally revealed who they had been before falling into the Taylors' hands. Claire had been Nicole Bennett, an art student from Minneapolis who vanished during a New York vacation in 2000. Vanessa was Alexandra Kozlov, a Russian immigrant and dancer reported missing in 2001. The revelation brought a new identity crisis. Were they Nicole and Alexandra? Or were they Claire and Vanessa? Or were they something entirely new, forged in the crucible of unimaginable experience? "I don't remember anything about being Nicole," Claire confessed to Jessica during a quiet afternoon in Central Park. They had begun to reclaim spaces that fear had stolen, including the park that had been the stage for so much tragedy. "But now I know I have a family in Minnesota, parents who never stopped looking for me." The reunion with their biological families was carefully managed by Dr. Blackwood. For the parents of Nicole and Alexandra, the shock was overwhelming. Their daughters had returned, but with different faces and no memory of their past lives. "It's like meeting a ghost," Nicole's mother said after their first encounter, her voice breaking. "I see it in her gestures. There are fragments of my daughter in there, but she's also someone completely different." For Sarah and Jessica, these reunions sparked conflicting emotions. They were genuinely happy for the families who had their daughters back. But they also felt a renewed sense of loss. The special relationship they had built with Claire and Vanessa would inevitably change. "We're not just going to disappear from your lives," Vanessa assured Sarah during a farewell dinner. She and Claire had decided to travel, first to Minneapolis, then to St. Petersburg, to reconnect with their roots. "You are part of who we are now, an essential part." Jessica smiled through her tears. "You carry a piece of our daughters with you, not just in your faces, but in how you've faced all of this with such strength." That night, after Claire and Vanessa had left, Sarah and Jessica sat in silence in Jessica's apartment. On the table, photographs of Madison and Olivia were mixed with recent pictures of Claire and Vanessa. "Do you think it ever ends?" Sarah finally asked. "The grief? The loss?" Jessica considered the question, looking out the window at the illuminated Manhattan skyline. "It doesn't end," she answered softly. "But it changes. It transforms into something we can carry with us." Outside, the city continued its relentless rhythm. indifferent to the tragedies and resurrections occurring within its limits. And somewhere in that urban vastness, the faces of Madison and Olivia still existed, different yet present, carrying stories no one could ever have imagined. The autumn of 2006 brought a changing climate. The leaves in Central Park turned gold and scarlet, falling softly on paths where, a year before, storms had revealed dark secrets. The city moved on as it always did, but for those touched by the Taylor Lazarus case, time was measured differently, before and after. Sarah Mitchell had returned to work full-time as a university professor, finding solace in routine and in mentoring bright young minds. Her office at NYU now held a new photograph alongside the books and academic papers. Her with Claire, with Nicole during her last visit to New York, both of them smiling in front of the Metropolitan Museum. Jessica Cooper, for her part, had transformed the Mitchell Cooper Foundation into a national powerhouse, advocating for victims of medical crimes and human trafficking. Her connections with the FBI and other federal agencies had earned her the nickname the Huntress in certain circles for her relentless drive to find missing persons. It was a Tuesday morning when Jessica received a call from Claire in Minneapolis. "Something strange is happening," the young woman said, her voice tense. "I've started remembering things, not dreams or fragments, but whole memories of Nicole, of me before." Jessica sat up straight in her chair. "What kind of memories?" "My 16th birthday, the taste of the chocolate cake my mom always made, the name of my first boyfriend, Thomas Berger." Claire paused. "I checked with my parents. It's all accurate, Jessica. These are memories I shouldn't have." The doctors were baffled. According to every established neurological theory, Claire should not be recovering Nicole's memories. There was no physical connection between the original brain and her current neural configuration. Dr. Blackwood, consulted urgently, proposed a controversial theory. "Memory may not reside solely in the brain," he explained during a video conference with Claire, her biological parents, and Jessica. "Emerging research suggests a form of cellular memory distributed throughout the body. Cells retain imprints of experiences, especially traumatic ones." But how would that explain childhood memories? Nicole's father, a biochemistry professor, challenged. "It wouldn't. Not completely," Blackwood admitted. His gaze fell on a scientific paper on his desk. Unless the Taylors did more than just facial transplants. The recovered notes mentioned experiments with stem cells and neural regeneration. It's possible they attempted experimental techniques to transfer not just physical features but neural patterns. The possibility was both terrifying and fascinating. Had the Taylors, in their quest for perfection, inadvertently stumbled upon a method to transfer aspects of consciousness itself? Meanwhile, Vanessa was experiencing a different but equally baffling phenomenon. Since arriving in St. Petersburg to meet Alexandra's family, she had begun to understand and speak Russian with increasing fluency, despite never having formally studied the language. "It's like the words just exist somewhere inside me," she explained to Sarah during a call. "I hear someone speak, and before my conscious mind can process what they're saying, I already know the meaning." These developments drew the attention of neuroscience researchers worldwide. The Taylor Lazarus case, already notorious for its ethical and criminal implications, now opened up disturbing scientific possibilities. If memory and identity could persist beyond their original neurological substrates, what did that mean for our understanding of the self? In December, Claire and Vanessa returned to New York to participate in a specialized medical symposium. The reunion with Sarah and Jessica was warm but tinged with a new complexity. The four women had evolved, following paths that were simultaneously pulling them apart and drawing them together. "Sometimes I look in the mirror and I see three people," Claire confessed during a private dinner. I see Olivia, whose features I wear. I see Nicole, whose memories are returning. And I see Claire, who I've been for these last few years. It's disorienting. Jessica nodded sympathetically. Identity is never simple, even under normal circumstances. We're all multiple versions of ourselves. Vanessa, who had been pensive, finally spoke. I've been considering something radical. A tense silence fell over the table. I want to meet Emma Taylor. Why? Sarah asked, her voice a carefully constructed neutral tone. Because I need to understand, Vanessa replied. Not just what they did to us, but why. And I think she's the only one who can answer that. The visitation request, supported by a case for psychological and therapeutic necessity, was finally approved. On a gray January morning, Vanessa, flanked by Dr. Blackwood and Detective Harris, found herself sitting across from Emma Taylor in a sterile prison meeting room. Emma had aged remarkably in prison. Her once-dyed hair was shot through with white, and deep lines carved a map of regret across her face. She seemed smaller, diminished by the immense weight of her crimes. You look so much like her, were her first words, her gaze fixed on Vanessa. Madison, even more so than when we finished the procedure. Vanessa remained composed. I'm not here to talk about Madison. I'm here to understand why you chose me, why you chose Alexandra. Emma studied her with clinical eyes, a vestige of her medical past. Structural compatibility, the same cranial shape, similar bone density. You were taller than Madison, but the facial proportionality was nearly identical. She paused. And you were alone. No close family in the country, just a temporary resident in New York. The kind of person who could disappear without raising too many questions. The coldness of her analysis sent a shiver down Vanessa's spine, but she persisted. Was it your idea or Robert's? Mine, Emma admitted without hesitation. Robert had the surgical genius, but I had the vision. I have always believed that beauty is the purest form of power. What we did was a redistribution of that power. Redistribution? You murdered two innocent young women. Emma tilted her head slightly. Technically, they didn't die immediately. Their brains were functional during the initial procedure. Their consciousnesses persisted. As we transferred the facial tissues, perhaps that explains your current situation. The revelation struck Vanessa like a physical blow. The thought that Madison had been aware, on some level, as her face was being stolen from her was too horrific to fully process. Why are you telling me this? Emma looked at her directly. Because you asked for the truth, and because in a twisted way you are our legacy, our daughters. Vanessa stood abruptly. We are not your creations. We are your victims, and we are survivors. Leaving the prison, Vanessa was silent for the long drive back to New York. Finally, as they crossed the Manhattan Bridge, she spoke. They were conscious, Harris, the whole time, and I think somehow they still are. That night, in an extraordinary meeting at Jessica's apartment, Vanessa shared her theory with Claire, Sarah, and Jessica. It's not just cellular memory, she explained, pacing nervously. It's something deeper. I think fragments of their consciousness were transferred with the tissues. Not their whole souls, not their entire minds, but something essential, Claire suggested, unconsciously touching her own face. Like an imprint, a lingering impression. Dr. Blackwood, invited to join via video conference, offered his perspective. Current science cannot fully explain what you're experiencing, but there are precedents in transplant literature. Recipients who adopt tastes, preferences, even personality traits from their donors. Are you suggesting that Madison and Olivia are living somehow through you? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Not exactly. Vanessa answered. But I believe something of them persists, and I think we have a responsibility to that persistence. Spring brought with it new developments. Claire had decided to complete the literature degree Olivia had started while continuing to explore her own recovered memories as Nicole. Vanessa, combining her legal training with her new insights, began to specialize in bioethics and the rights of transplant patients. One April afternoon, while visiting the memorial in Central Park together, Claire shared something she had kept secret. "I've been writing a book," she confessed. "Not just about our experience, but it's hard to explain. Sometimes I feel like I'm writing with three different voices. Mine, Nicole's, and another one that I believe, is Olivia's." Jessica, who was with them, felt a wave of conflicting emotions. "Can I read it someday?" Claire nodded. "You're the first person I would offer it to. You and Sarah should be the first to read it when it's ready." As they walked back, they passed Bethesda Fountain. The water danced in the late afternoon light, creating shifting, broken reflections. Claire stopped, watching her own fragmented image on the rippling surface. "Sometimes I think," she said softly, "that we're all like this reflection, fragmented, multiple, constantly changing, but still, somehow, ourselves." Jessica placed a hand on her shoulder. "Olivia used to say something similar. She wrote a poem about it in her last year of high school." Claire smiled. "I know, I remember it. Or maybe she remembers it through me." That night, in the quiet of her apartment, Jessica opened a box she had kept sealed for years. It held Olivia's poetry notebooks, preserved like treasures. She opened one at random and found a poem titled Reflection. "In troubled waters my face divides, 1,000 versions where self resides. Each one a possible me, each one true, each one a falsehood shining through. Which one is I? Am I them all? Or something else that waits between the fall?" With trembling hands, she took a photo of the poem and sent it to Claire. The reply came minutes later. "I recognize it, not as something I've read before, but as something I've felt, as if the words have been living inside me, waiting to be remembered." For Sarah and Jessica, the evolution of Claire and Vanessa represented a strange kind of continuity. It was not the future they had imagined for their daughters, but it was a future that, in some mysterious way, included fragments of them. The Taylor Lazarus case had forever changed how medicine, law, and philosophy viewed the concepts of identity and consciousness. But for these four women, the experience transcended the academic. It was personal, visceral, a reality lived daily in the mirror and in the dreams that came with the night. As New York bloomed with the life of spring, they continued their extraordinary journey. Two mothers who had lost their daughters but found a new form of connection. And two young women who carried with them not only the faces of others but fragments of their consciousness, interwoven with their own evolving identities. And in that entanglement, in that persistence that defied death and science, there was something that, if not comfort, at least offered meaning in the face of the incomprehensible. 5 years had passed since the Taylors' capture. Time, that silent alchemist, had transformed open wounds into visible but manageable scars. New York, true to its nature, had absorbed the story into its urban mythology. The Taylor Lazarus case had become the subject of documentaries, books, and even a controversial television series that none of the women involved dared to watch. It was June of 2010, and the main auditorium at Columbia University was packed. In the audience, Sarah Mitchell and Jessica Cooper occupied privileged seats in the front row. Both were dressed in sober elegance, their faces showing the passage of time, but also a hard-won serenity. On stage, Vanessa Kozlov, as she had decided to call herself, combining her identity as Vanessa with her original surname, adjusted the microphone. At 30, she radiated a commanding presence. Her hair, now shorter and a natural shade of brown, framed the face that had once belonged to Madison Mitchell. "Welcome to the inaugural conference of the Lazarus Inverse Foundation," she began, her clear voice filling the auditorium. "An organization dedicated to reversing the damage caused by those who saw the human body as a commodity and identity as something transferable." Amid applause, she explained the mission: to provide legal, medical, and psychological support to victims of medical crimes, to fund ethical research into transplantation and cellular memory, and to advocate for international legislation against organ trafficking and illegal experimentation. "I am not here as a victim," she continued, her gaze sweeping across the audience before settling on Sarah. "I am here as living testimony that human identity is both resilient and fluid. I wear the face of Madison Mitchell. I retain fragmented memories of Alexandra Kozlov. But I am unequivocally my own person, a unique synthesis that honors their legacies while forging its own path." As she finished her presentation, she yielded the stage to the next speaker. Claire Bennett, as she had chosen to be called after reconnecting with her biological family, walked forward with grace. Her eyes, which had once belonged to Olivia Cooper, shone with intellectual intensity. "Our story is unique, but it is not isolated," she began. "Across the world, people struggle to reconcile fragmented identities: displaced refugees, survivors of trauma, people whose lives were interrupted and reconfigured by forces beyond their control." Claire paused, her gaze meeting Jessica's. "My experience has taught me that identity is not a fixed object, but a continuous process. We are stories we tell ourselves, stories that sometimes include voices that are not entirely our own." She held up a book with a deep blue cover. "That is why I wrote Three Voices, not as a simple memoir, but as an exploration of how consciousness can persist and transform beyond its original physical limits." The book, published just a month earlier, had already generated intense debate in academic and medical circles. Combining memoir, speculative fiction, and philosophical essay, Claire had created something unprecedented. A work written from the interwoven perspective of three consciousnesses sharing, in some mysterious way, a single being. After the conference, the four women gathered at a nearby cafe, a ritual they maintained whenever they were all in New York. The years had transformed their relationship into something that defied easy definition. Deeper than friendship, different from traditional kinship, but just as unbreakable. "The foundation has already received collaboration offers from 3 university hospitals," Vanessa commented, stirring her tea. "And the Senate is considering our proposals for the Medical Identity Protection Act." Sarah smiled with pride. Madison would have been impressed. She always wanted to change the system from within. "I know," Vanessa replied softly. "Sometimes I can feel her determination, like an undercurrent guiding my decisions." Claire, who was idly flipping through a copy of her book, looked up. "Do you ever wonder if this is what they would have wanted? If we are, in some way, fulfilling destinies that were stolen from them?" Jessica considered the question. "I think you've created something entirely new, something that honors their memories but is entirely your own." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Detective Harris, now the chief of a specialized unit for medical crimes. The years had turned his hair completely white, but his gaze remained sharp and penetrating. "Sorry to interrupt," he apologized, taking a seat after they exchanged greetings. "But I thought you should know immediately. Emma Taylor has requested a meeting with you two." He looked directly at Claire and Vanessa. She says she has critical information that she will only share with you. A tense silence fell over the table. Emma Taylor, diagnosed with terminal cancer 6 months prior, was now confined to the federal prison's infirmary. What kind of information? Vanessa finally asked. She didn't specify, only that it was about the others. Harris replied. She specifically mentioned the Lazarus twins. Claire and Vanessa exchanged a look. For years, persistent rumors had suggested that the Taylors had performed other similar procedures before Madison and Olivia, possible victims and recipients who had never been identified. We have to go, Claire decided. If there are others like us, they need to know. 3 days later, in the prison infirmary, Emma Taylor received them from a hospital bed. The cancer had consumed her, leaving a skeletal version of the woman she had once been. Tubes and monitors surrounded her, marking the fading rhythm of her life. You've grown strong, she observed, her voice a weak rasp. Evolved beyond what we ever imagined possible. Vanessa's expression remained impassive. We're not here to reminisce. You mentioned the Lazarus twins. Emma gave a slight nod. Before you, there was a first experiment. 2 sisters, psychiatric patients at a private institute in Switzerland. No family, convenient diagnoses of schizophrenia. They were perfect for testing our techniques. A chill ran down Claire's spine. What did you do to them? The same as we did to Madison and Olivia, but the recipients were different. Women with powerful connections, willing to pay any price for eternal youth. The procedure was imperfect. There were unexpected neurological complications. What kind of complications? Vanessa pressed. Emma coughed weakly. Consciousness fusion. The recipients began to manifest memories, habits, even the psychiatric disorders of the donors. One of them killed herself 6 months later. The other... She paused, a significant weight in her silence. The other is closer than you imagine. With a trembling hand, Emma passed them a sealed envelope. All the information is in here. Names, dates, the survivor's location. Consider it my final act of, I won't say redemption, I don't deserve it. Let's call it acknowledgement. Outside the prison, under a relentless summer sky, Claire and Vanessa examined the documents. The photographs showed 2 young women with similar features, identified only as Subject A and Subject B, alongside elaborate surgical diagrams and clinical notes. According to this, the surviving recipient lives in Seattle, Claire murmured, under the name Diana Mercer, an art gallerist. Vanessa studied the recent photograph attached, an elegant, middle-aged woman whose face held a beauty that seemed too perfect to be natural. We have to find her. To warn her. Warn her of what? Claire questioned. It's been almost 10 years. She's probably built a whole life with that identity. Warn her that she's not alone, Vanessa answered, that what she's experiencing has an explanation, that there are others like her. The decision to travel to Seattle was relayed to Sarah and Jessica, who insisted on accompanying them. Over the years, they had developed a protective instinct towards Claire and Vanessa, even knowing the 2 young women had proven their own extraordinary resilience. We don't know how this woman will react, Jessica cautioned during the transcontinental flight. She's been living with this duality for so long without understanding its origin. It could be dangerous, Sarah added. Or liberating, Claire countered. It depends on how she's managed. Seattle greeted them with an unusually sunny sky. The Mercer Gallery, housed within a gracefully restored edifice in the Arts District, was a showcase for the cutting edge of contemporary art. According to Harris's preliminary research, Diana Mercer had emerged on the art scene 8 years prior with no verifiable history in that world. They entered posing as potential clients, wandering through the exhibitions while discreetly scanning for the proprietor. At last, an assistant informed them that Mrs. Mercer was in her private office and was not receiving visitors without an appointment. Tell her we're distant relatives, Claire improvised, from New York. Minutes later, they were led into a sleek office with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views of the bay. Behind a minimalist desk, Diana Mercer regarded them, her expression unreadable. The resemblance to the photographs of Subject A was subtle, yet undeniable. The shape of her eyes, the underlying bone structure. Years of additional surgeries had altered the original result, but for those who knew what to look for, the connection was unmistakable. "I have no relatives in New York," Diana said, her voice a study in control. "Who are you, really? And what is it that you want?" Vanessa stepped forward. "We knew Emma and Robert Taylor. We know what they did to your face and to your mind." The color drained from Diana's cheeks. Her eyes, a deep blue that was likely not her own, widened in terror. "I don't know what you're talking about. I think you should leave." "They did it to us too," Claire intervened softly, gesturing to her own face. "We are like you. We wear faces that once belonged to others, and sometimes we hear their voices. We remember their lives." Diana sank into her chair, her carefully constructed composure finally shattering. "I thought I was going mad," she whispered. "The doctors diagnosed schizophrenia, dissociative identity disorder. But nothing explained why I had memories of places I'd never been, of a childhood in a country I never visited." Over the next few hours, in the privacy of her apartment overlooking Puget Sound, Diana Mercer, born Elizabeth Walsh, a pharmaceutical executive, told them her story. How she had contacted the Taylors seeking a revolutionary facial rejuvenation, how she had awakened with a new face and strange voices in her head, and how she had rebuilt her entire identity to escape the past. "I never knew where this face came from," she confessed, gently touching her cheek. "Only that it was beautiful, and that it came with unexpected passengers." They showed her the photograph of Subject A, a young Swiss psychiatric patient named Sophia Keller. Diana stared at it for a long time, silent tears tracing paths down her perfect face. "Sometimes I dream of snow-capped mountains and a crystal-clear lake," she murmured, "and I feel a peace I never knew in my old life. I suppose they are her memories, not mine." At dusk, as they returned to their hotel, the four women silently processed this new piece of the puzzle. Diana Elizabeth's existence confirmed their theories about cellular memory and the transfer of consciousness, but it also raised new questions about the limits of human identity. "We are like islands in an archipelago," Keller mused that night as they watched the Seattle lights from their hotel terrace. "Separate, but connected beneath the surface, each one unique yet part of something larger." Sarah nodded, embracing her gently. "Madison would be astonished at the person you've become, not because you wear her face, but because of the strength with which you have forged your own path." 2 weeks later, on a warm July afternoon, a small group gathered in Central Park. Diana Mercer had flown in from Seattle to join them for an intimate ceremony. Under the shade of the trees near Bethesda Fountain, Keller read passages from 3 voices while Vanessa placed flowers by the memorial. "We are not only who we were, nor are we only who we are now," Keller recited. "We are an ongoing conversation between past and present, between what was lost and what has been found. We are living testaments that identity transcends the body, that consciousness finds unexpected ways to persist." Jessica, watching these 3 women who wore face they were not born with, but had made their own, felt a strange sense of peace. The circle somehow had been completed. Tragedy had given way to something unforeseen, a new form of existence, an unexpected continuity. Diana, who had decided to join the Lazarus Inversion Foundation as a consultant, shared her plans to use her gallery to give a voice to stories of fragmented and reconstructed identities. Art can express what science cannot yet explain, she affirmed. As the sun began its descent, painting the New York sky in shades of gold and rose, the 7 women, 3 who wore faces not their own, 2 mothers who had lost daughters but found unexpected connections, and 2 souls who persisted in mysterious ways through shared tissue and memory, formed a circle of interlocked hands. It was not an ending, they all knew that. It was simply the next chapter in a story that defied the conventional definitions of life, death, and identity. A story that would continue to evolve as long as they were there to tell it. And in the heart of Manhattan, where it had all begun with a late-night walk and a fatal encounter, the city pulsed with its own unstoppable rhythm, indifferent to the personal dramas it held, yet somehow transformed by them, like all great stages that bear silent witness to the human tragedies and resurrections that play out within their domain.